but you're called to do something. And when you know your why, it can sustain you even through the tough times, but at the same time, it can give you confidence even when you're doing your ministry with others. So there could be a lot of reasons. You may have some reasons, but when you know your why, it'll sustain you when it's hard. And it will also give you
Hey y'all, welcome to the My Place podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Mary McSwain, and I'm joined as I normally am by my dad, Jay McSwain.
And it's good to be here with you and seeing your new merch that you have. Look, that shirt looks good on you, Mary.
Thank you. For those of y'all who are listening on Spotify or Apple Music, we also record this and post it on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, you'll see that I am wearing some new Place merch that the co-founder, aka my mom, had made for us. We were at a conference, what will right now be this past week with the Georgia Baptist Convention, and she wanted to make sure as I walked around and met and mingled with everyone from the convention that they all knew that I was with Place Ministries, and it actually worked really well.
And you're a good representative.
Yes, I hope that I was a good representative because, visibility is everything, but it was really fun. I walked around and I didn't see everyone that I knew because, I interned with them a couple years ago. So there were
the Georgia Baptist Mission Board.
Yes, there were a couple people that I was looking for that I didn't see, but there were a couple people that I weren't expecting to see that were there. I had my first connection at one of these adult quote unquote conventions of one of my own friends. It's one of the guys who dated one of my friends in college that we were all really close with. He is in a residency program at a church in Atlanta, and he was at the conference. So we made our first own, because both of our dads are in ministry. So a lot of the people that we know are people who know us through our dads, but we saw each other and made our first connection of one of our own friends in this new adulting world that we're in.
Yeah.
And I think that was this past week. You've been doing a couple things since we last talked. What did you do this past weekend? Was it just the wedding that we both went to?
No, I actually taught Place last weekend at my church, and I was sharing with our staff meeting today and about how'd it go, and it was really cool. I said, our church is a fairly ethnically diverse area, and our church represents our area. And I said, we had 17 people that went through the training, and we had 6 people that were not Caucasian. We had African American there, we had Hispanic, we had Asian, and we had Indian. And I was really sad because today I was asked by the guy that's Indian, to go eat at an Indian restaurant tomorrow, but I'm in the throes of those 17 coaching sessions and then going to teach for you tomorrow night. But the last thing about that group, out of the 17, the ages went from 14 to 81. And last night I did the 14-year-old, and tomorrow morning I'm doing the 81-year-old. So yeah, it was great. And you and I were at a school that you went to as a little kid that we're looking at, hopefully, prayerfully, creating a partnership with them using Place at their school. So yeah, we've been kind of busy a little bit.
When was the retreat that you went on with the church?
Oh, yes, that was weekend before last.
Okay.
And that's where I went with high school boys, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, with high school boys, and took them through Place at the retreat, which was really cool, 9th through 12th graders, and they were great kids.
A couple of our examples that we just talked about is going to give this away a little bit, but I have people ask me a lot, how old do you recommend people going through Place? At the convention that I was at last week, I had a couple of ministries that work with middle and high school students, boys and girls. And at a couple of the other conferences I've been to, I've had parents and children's ministry leaders and youth pastors and college pastors ask me, what is the recommended age for kids to go through? So what would you recommend?
Well, I actually got a text today from a pastor in Nebraska that uses place, and he asked me that, do you have kids? And when I hear kids, I think like elementary, and we don't have elementary, but when we designed the what we call student curriculum, and it was for 6th through 12th grade. So our curriculum is designed around being a six, but even though the students that went through this weekend, they went through the adult version and they did just fine. But we do have curriculum for 6th grade and up.
Because really, the assessments are essentially the same in the student versus the adult.
Yeah.
And I think the age that you go through the curriculum and the assessment at, whether you're 10, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever season of life that you're in, I think there's a value in light of the season of life that you're in, and there's an impact that it can have. For a middle schooler, they might not be choosing their career yet, but they might be wondering what gift that the Lord gave them and whether or not they're going to want to serve in children's ministry if that's offered, or how they might be able to use their gift in their home. But there's a lot of ways that for, say, a middle school student, it can impact them. For high schoolers, we were at that school last week that goes from elementary to high school. We're looking at partnering with them, and they asked us, what do we recommend if we were to start taking our students through it? And I thought you gave a really insightful answer. And we recommended for them that we would start taking 11th grade through it, because when you're a freshman in high school, you're having fun. You're just trying to figure out where your locker is and how to get to your classes. As a sophomore, you're still trying to get to know the ropes, and you're kind of content just with that season of life. By the time you're a senior, you're pretty much decided on where you're going. And if you're not, you're just stressed about what colleges you have or haven't applied to. And you recommended 11th grade because that is really one of the prime times where students are starting to look to what they're going to do next with their life.
Yeah, after high school, yeah. That's when they start, yeah. So, yeah, 11th grade I've found is great.
And I think that is insightful as well for parents, because a lot of times parents want to know how they can help their child make a lot of these big life decisions.
Navigate those decisions that they're trying to make. And they're still under the parents when it seems sometimes like when they get in the 12th grade, they've kind of checked out, even from school, from their parents. Not all, but a lot do. And so I think 11th grade is a good year.
We talked about this verse a couple weeks ago in the podcast, a few episodes ago, that is Proverbs 22, where it says, train up a child in the way that they should go, so when they're old, they will not depart from it. And one of the encouragements and the urges of that verse is to train up a child according to their bent. And when you have the language of an assessment like place, where you understand their personality, their gifts, their abilities, their passions, you have that language to help guide them as they're trying to figure out what their bent is, and as they're trying to figure out how that relates to their career and their major and where they want to go to college, and how they'll navigate all these upcoming seasons of their life. And it's really helpful because a lot of impact can be had when you're in high school and the life experiences that you have. And I think you even found that weekend at the retreat that a lot of the impact that is made in a person's life can be while they're in high school, while they're in college, in their childhood, when they're growing up. They are molded, they're very malleable, and so much of someone's most impactful life experiences can even be had while they're still in high school and in college, even in middle school. And from the article that we recently published, if y'all are listening to this, it will likely be up on our website. We'll make sure to put a link in the description of this podcast so that you can go read the article. But you recently published an article, a blog post about what you found that weekend. And you said that what you heard that weekend both inspired you and amazed you. So tell us a little bit more about why that weekend and what you heard inspired you.
So as we were on the retreat, I started the session on connecting passion with ministry. And I said and again, these were just all high school boys, no girls. It was a boys' retreat. I said to them, you may very likely have already had a life experience that will give you the passion for who you may be putting down right now. you may have very likely already had the life experience that will guide you, have impact on where you give your life in serving other people. And so the students, they did the exercise I feel passion for, and and I had 3 or 4 of them share when they broke down in their small groups with their small group leader. All of them shared with their leader. But at the retreat, Mary, I thought of this. I don't even know if I'd had it planned, but I had every one of the adult leaders come up to the microphone and share with the students who was their number one passion group and why. And only 2 of the leaders that came up were paid. It was our 2 student pastors. The rest of them were volunteers that served not only for that weekend, but they lead small groups on Sundays and Wednesdays at our church, and they pour into high school boys. Every single one of them shared about a life experience as a middle schooler or high schooler. And what was fascinating to me was some of them shared times that weren't so great when they were that age. Others had men like what they were doing that weekend and week out in our student ministry that poured into them. And that was just, I'd made that statement before the session began. And then to have them stand up, and every single one of them, there were 10 men that went, and they were from their 20s to the oldest one. I was the oldest one there, but there was one of the men was in his 50s. We had 20s, 30s, 40s, and a 50-year-old, and then me. But every one of them had a life experience that gave them a passion to work with students. And that was, I wasn't surprised because I said the statement before, but to have every one of them, it did surprise me to have all 10, but it also inspired me that life experiences have so much to do with where we want to be used by God.
For folks who aren't familiar with our assessment, the PLACE assessment looks at 5 different elements of who you are: your personality, your spiritual gifts, your abilities, your passions, and your life experiences. And when you look at your passions in the assessment, it asks everyone to identify who you're passionate about. It could be individuals, groups of people, and you also identify how you demonstrate your passion. For these men in particular, because oftentimes when people think about the PLACE assessment, they envision it as people who are new to a church that don't know where their place is, and so they identify who they're passionate about in order to be given direction of where to serve in the church or even where to take their life and where they serve God through their vocation.
Yeah.
What do you think the value was for these men who have already seemingly found their place in the student ministry to identify their passion that weekend?
Well, in our workbook and the benefits, one of the things that we say is when you know who you are, you will gain confidence, Romans 12:3, in those ministry situations. And I think one of the benefits is it gives you confidence. But here's one of the great benefits that I teach every time I teach this. When you know your why, and it gets tough. When you have no margin of time, you're depleted. It's hard. Life is not being so wonderful for you, but you're called to do something. And when you know your why, it can sustain you even through the tough times, but at the same time, it can give you confidence even when you're doing your ministry with others. So it could be a lot of reasons. You may have some reasons, but when you know your why, it'll sustain you when it's hard. And it will also give you confidence when maybe you even think, why am I doing this? Because God He put that group of people in my heart to make a difference in their lives.
You talked about this a little bit earlier, but oftentimes our life experiences do influence our passions, who we are passionate about. And I think when we acknowledge certain life experiences and how they propelled us towards the person or the people that we're passionate about today, I think that wells up in us more gratitude for what God brought us through, because what He brought us through brought us to the people that we're passionate about now. Oftentimes, those life experiences will not always be what we call victorious life experiences. Oftentimes, they will be difficult life experiences that we wrestled in or struggled through. But God brought us through those experiences so that we could comfort others with the same comfort we experienced from God during those seasons of our life. And you mentioned some of those leaders. They are passionate about high school boys, maybe not because they had a great experience in high school, but they want to be for them who they wish they had when they were in their shoes. And when you can identify your why, when you can identify those life experiences that propel you towards the people or the groups that you're passionate about now, I think it allows us to be so much more grateful for what God brings us through, because we see how He brought us through those experiences, through those seasons, to propel us towards our passion and the people that we would be passionate for. And that informs our why, but it also gives us gratitude for what God brought us through in our past.
You know what else I think is cool? So oftentimes, as I said to those students, you may have already had a life experience. On the other side is people who've not had that life experience. As I talked about in last week's episode, I met with Caitlin, 14, and her brother Joshua, that is 17. And both of them had mercy. Both of their top gift was mercy. Well, and both of them wanted to know more about their gifts and how to use them in everyday life. That was what Joshua told me. So what I ended up doing was I took them over to their people group passions, and both of them had like lonely individuals, uh, wounded emotionally, but they were people hospitalized. Again, the 14-year-old senior adults. And I went through each one of them, and I said, why do you have a passion for wounded individuals? And Joshua starts talking about and why. I asked Caitlin, why did she have a passion for the hospitalized? She starts talking about the why. And I write. I'm sitting there writing. And both of them are speaking straight through the lens of their gifting. It is the coolest thing in the world when you ask somebody why they have a passion. Either they go back to a life experience, or most of the time, Mary, they start talking through their personality, even if they have not had that life experience. And neither one of them talked about being hospitalized, about being lonely, which was one of the ones Joshua had. But they started talking through the lens of their gifts. And again, I'm writing word for word what they say. And I go back, as you know, and I share it with them. And I always say, and you didn't even know that you had a passion for those group of people because of what God gave you through your gifting. And I always say this, how does that make you feel? And it's like, most people, the word is good. Good. When you can see your why through the way God has gifted you, that's also a powerful motivator, because who gave you that gift to begin with? We talked about that even last week, being grateful for what God gave you, but He gave you those gifts to be able to go to your who, which also explains your why.
That explains so much of the value of looking at your passions and talking about your why. So often it can be difficult for people to understand how their spiritual gifts are meant to be or can be demonstrated or expressed in their life. But oftentimes you will use your gifts with the people that you're passionate about. And it may be like you said, it may be your spiritual gift that draws you towards a certain group of people that you don't have a shared life experience with, but your gift draws them to your gift draws them to you or you to them. Like someone with the spiritual gift of mercy, they are drawn towards hurting people. They might not have a shared life experience, but the mere fact those people are hurting draws them to them. And that is one of the ways that their spiritual gift is evident in their life, is by the people that they are drawn to. And what great evidence of the gifts that we are given, where we can't explain it, only what God has given us can explain why we are drawn to those people. And that, I think, is so much evident and testimony to it is God who determines our gifts. It is God who gives us our gift. And it is only God and what he has given us that explains some of the people that we're drawn to and some of the ways that we serve people, when the only thing that can explain our why is the gifts that we didn't earn, we didn't deserve, we didn't merit, but that were given out of grace and out of love to us.
And we're drawn toward people that may fall in line with where that gift would be most effective and used. Like, we're all called to take care of the poor and the downtrodden. The Bible's clear on that. But those who have gifts like mercy, they are going to be more drawn toward those people, and those people are going to be more drawn toward them, and they're going to be more effective. Somebody like me that has the gift of leadership, encouragement, exhortation, I'm drawn more toward people that are ready to go conquer. And me giving leadership, giving those steps of exhortation to help them accomplish those goals. I'm drawn, and I think people are drawn to me because of those gifts that are within me. But I think everybody is drawn toward people that are in line with their gifts, and people are drawn toward people that are needing those gifts at that time in their life. And that's the beauty of why all the gifts of the body are needed.
And the value of identifying your passion, identifying your why, can on the one hand propel you to be grateful for the life experiences that influenced your why and influenced your passion. Mm-hmm. And it can also cause you to be grateful for the gifts that explain your why, that gravitate you towards those people that you're passionate about. And that is part of the value of that C in the place assessment, is connecting passion with ministry, identifying your passion, who or what you're passionate about. And that's why I think that moment for everyone who goes through the assessment, but for those leaders in particularly, the value for them identifying their why. What do you think was the value for the people that they lead, in this instance, the students, to hear their why?
What was the value? Is it gave them validation, confirmation. It gave them that God had been working in their life. And it gave them, okay, even the ones that had bad experiences said when they were younger, it also says that God can use even those bad experiences to use them for good at some point in their life. I think that's a great value of knowing your why, is that you can see even through every type of life experience, God can use it for good. And he can also use, if you've been through life experiences, he can also use you to be able to walk back to people that are walking where you have walked in your past.
How do you think knowing your why impacts your effectiveness in where you serve or what you do?
It gives you a lot more motivation. I mean, if you know the why, as a D personality, I'd say it can drive you. If you're an I personality, it can motivate you. If you're a C, it can sustain you. If you're an S, it can, what's the word for an S that you could say?
Propel.
Well, S's sometimes need propelling, right? But it can soothe you that I'm doing what God wants me to do. But I think your personality, when you know your why in that area, it can give you what you need to do what you're called to do.
Your why so often, I think, can increase your longevity and your motivation, your drive, your inspiration, the sustenance you need to keep going. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, it can allow you to keep going. I think back even to high school basketball practice. From what I've experienced and what I've seen, my high school basketball practice is the most intense thing that I've ever done in terms of the physical demand that it required of you. We weren't allowed to walk anywhere. We weren't even allowed to jog anywhere. We had to run everywhere. We had to do everything at 100%. We had to practice the way that we played. And there was such a high standard that was demanded out of us. But what kept people in the long run, there's a lot of people who quit. But the people that made it through were the people that understood the why behind why is it so hard? Why do we have to go so hard? Why is this so much harder than what other people are required to do? And the why for why it was so hard was that it increased our longevity and it made us outlast other teams. When we practiced harder, we could play harder, we could outlast other teams. Even something as simple as, why can't I walk to go get water if we're having a break? Why do I have to run? Why does every single drill have to be done at such intensity? And the simple why was so that we didn't have to run suicides all the time. We didn't have to run in condition if we practiced so hard that our practice in and of itself was our conditioning. And even understanding a simple why like that we practice so hard so that we don't have to make you run for no reason, so that we can get more shots up, we can run more plays. And if you're doing it at a certain level of intensity, you'll be in good enough shape to not have to condition and to outlast other teams. But when we as players understood the why for why we do what we do and the results that can come from it, the purpose of it, the thought behind it, it increased our longevity, our motivation, our drive, our inspiration. It sustained us when we were tired, because in scripture, it says, run in such a way to get the prize. If you don't understand why you're running or what you're running to, it won't sustain you to keep going when things get hard. And when it comes to where you give your time or what you do, what you feel like God has called you to do, if you don't know your why, you won't be sustained when things get hard.
I think as we come to the end, I think this would be so important to remember, and I'm going to speak to those that you are watching. Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, your passion, your why, for it is the wellspring of life. And if you don't guard your passion, your heart, your why, God gives you that burst because he knows that you can lose it. And when it gets hard, when people are trying to take it and take your passion to help them fulfill their passion, if you know your why, you can hold to it and guard it.
As we do wrap up our conversation today, we want to encourage you to find your why. Find why we do what you do, why you serve, why you would serve if that is something that you feel like God is calling you to do in your spare time, is to find your why, because it might be that you find more gratitude for where God has brought you through and who he's drawing you to. You might find your why and understand more about how God has given you a spiritual gift and the people that it draws you to. But when you know your why, you can be sustained through things when life gets hard. So we would encourage you to identify your why so that you can find more gratitude for what God has brought you through and the people that he's drawing you to serve in life and ministry. We do hope that this conversation was encouraging to you. If you found encouragement in it, if you found truth in it, make sure that you share it with your friends and stay tuned for next week's episode.